All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Fit Fatherhood podcast, a podcast for fathers by fathers, where we talk about the four pillars of fatherhood, which are faith, family, finance, and fitness. And I'm excited, man. I'm excited to get back. It's been a little while, in between seasons, we take a little break. This season just so happens to line up with the new season and a new year. So this will be the first episode of 2025, first episode of this season. And I decided that starting this season, I'm going to do something that I did at the beginning, right? We're going back to our origins, and that's the first few episodes of this year of 2025 are going to be solo episodes. So it's just me and you guys, kind of talking about some things that are going on, talking about some goal setting, talking about things that are kind of current and happening in fatherhood, and the overarching theme of fathers being better in 2025. Um, there's a couple of things that are really important to me, and obviously fatherhood is one of them. But in terms of this podcast, is that I share information and I share things with you guys that will help you in your fatherhood journey, not stuff that I just want to talk about, or that things that are just coming up for me or whatever. Those type of podcasts are cool too, because sometimes you get to get insight into the mind of someone else. But my goal for this podcast and this series of episodes is to kind of share some things that I'm doing, that I'm seeing, that I'm experiencing, that I think can benefit you in the long run. And as you step into your journey, this chapter of your journey in 2025, how you could be a better father, better husband, better man, for the people around you, better leader, in this new season that's coming up. So first things first. I talked about this season 2, I think. So my father um, retired at the end of 2023. He worked for 20, or no, it's probably almost 30 years. 30 years, him and his brother owned two group homes, where they helped young men, boys become young men, basically come in at whatever age. I think the youngest that they took was like 8 or 9, help raise those young men to young adults, as long as they were able to stay in the house, right? Obviously, in the system, kids are in and out, they get in trouble, they, parents come back and get them, whatever the case may be, get bounced around a little bit. But um, being a part or being around that, to see that as those two guys. Listen, there were some kids in the group homes. I know the system, the foster care system, and the child system or whatever is not the best, but there were some kids in that program, just JR's North Star in Richmond, California. There's some kids in that program, man, that had better lives than some people I know. They really, really took care of them. They really, really made sure that they did not want or need for anything. It's not your typical movie or the stories you hear about group homes. It was not that at all. These young men lived, while they were in the care of my father and my uncle, a very good life. Anyway, so after 30 years of doing that, they both retire for a short time. Um, but they retire, and so my dad retires. He decides that he wants to run a business, start a business, another one. Like, bro, you've been working for 30 years. You retire so that you don't have to work anymore. But no, he's a workaholic, right? Now, you guys heard my story. That's one of the things I learned from him is to work, 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 right? But the hat that you guys see me wear all the time, if you watch the podcast, you've seen it on YouTube, or if you've seen me on social media, I wear a hat that has a money bag, a brain, and a dollar sign. And that's my dad and I. He had the idea of mental wealth. He's like, we spend a lot of time chasing money. I spent 30 years in the career, not just chasing money, doing things that were meaningful or whatever, but there was always because I'm getting paid. But we don't take care of our mental health. And so he was like, what if we called the company Mental Wealth? And we kind of went back and forth. I was like, oh, that's a great idea. Let's talk about some logos, back and forth. And boom, this is what we came up with. So the Mental Wealth brand came to existence. We haven't done really much with it other than just kind of create and stop at that point, right? But the idea of mental wealth is not lost on me. It's something that I've continued to think about and continue to pursue as we kind of pursue the idea of getting money to care for our family. We often do so at a cost, right? Whether it be physically or mentally. Physically, we aren't showing up or able to show up in the way that we want to because we're too tired or our bodies are broken down. Or mentally, we take all this stuff in and we're frustrated and we're overwhelmed. But we don't do anything to take care of our mental health while we're pursuing wealth. And so that kind of idea kind of all like boils down into one. So saying that because in 2023, um, I kind of felt the same way. So it's about a year, no, actually about 6 months ago. 6 months ago, I hit a wall. Okay, I took on a business that I opened up a gym, something I said I was never ever going to do again. In 2021, when I walked away from my previous company, I said that I was not going to get in the gym business because I understood what that meant, the kind of effort and intensity and work that you have to put in to run a successful business took me away from my family. And so I decided I wasn't going to do that anymore. In 2023, the opportunity to do it again came up, and it was an opportunity that was really hard for me to pass up. So after a lot of very difficult discussions, I decided to jump into it, but with some stipulations of how I was going to be a part of that business. Um, Things go as they go, and about 6 months ago, I was overwhelmed. I had a blossoming business who was busting at the seams with athletes, which is a good thing, but also means more work. I had my 9 to 5, and then I had built a life of presence with my family that they had gotten accustomed to, had gotten used to. I'm at every game, I'm at every practice, I'm picking people up from school, taking people from school, at every event, like all that stuff, right? But now I've got this business that requires me to be there to provide support and training or whatever. And then I have my 9 to 5 where I need to also be there as well. So I was overwhelmed, to kind of say the least. Like I just had so many things going on. For those of you that are entrepreneurs, know that there's fires to put out all the time. There's thoughts to put into the marketing and to the actual programming and planning, to the actual customer facing parts of it, to the behind the scenes parts of it. The same thing with my job, and obviously all these things were kind of piling up. I couldn't really focus on any one thing because there were so many things, and I kind of just felt like I was just barely getting through each day. I was slamming energy drinks because I wasn't sleeping well, because I had to stay up late, because that was the only time that I had that I could do work, programming workouts and checking balances and all that kind of stuff. I had to wait until put the kids to sleep, so then I stayed up later. But you guys know I get up early, and so my hours of sleep dwindled, and so to make up for that, I was drinking coffee or energy drinks and stuff like that, trying to push myself to stay awake, to be there and be good at what I do, if that makes sense. So I had to depend on caffeine, and but what what's funny about that is, and my wife says I have ADD or ADHD because caffeine typically, depending on what I'm doing, it makes me sleepy. It is counterproductive to an extent. Like if I get like a high amount of it, like some of those higher caffeine count energy drinks will make me sleepy. Um, so if I get a couple of them in a row, like I'm like, ugh, it's worse, right? It's a worse situation. So I had to find something that allowed me to have the clarity that I needed in order to get the tasks done that I had to get done, while also not feeling overwhelmed with like mental clarity, focus, being able to have the energy, still being able to go to sleep when I need to go to sleep. But then when I wake up, I had to be able to hit the road, and get after it. if that makes sense. So like I said, about six months ago, I was listening to Joe Rogan's podcast, and he's talking about Magic Mind, which is a nootropic mental performance shot, right? It helps you with focus. It helps you with clarity, sharper mind, less stress, clean energy, like all this stuff Joe is saying. And you hear stuff all the time about different things, right? People make claims about stuff, and um, you can believe it or not believe it, right? There's sometimes you see stuff out there and it's just these wild claims about what it is. And so I'm usually pretty skeptical about stuff. But as I listen to the episode, it's not saying anything that's making me not want to take a shot, right? Not making me want to like ask more questions about the validity of what he's saying. Like his stuff is adding up, it's making sense, right? The things that he's saying sound like it's okay, right? So I'm like, all right, well, here's what I'll do. I'll go to I think I went to Sprouts, and I got one. And I just so happened to see it though. Like I didn't go to Sprouts looking for it. It was a Sprouts. I was in the cold section and I saw one up there, and I'm like, oh, this is a thing that Joe Rogan was talking about. So I'm like, okay, cool. I'm gonna try it. So I did, and it wasn't like a boom, like an explosion of energy, but I just felt different, right? Like sometimes you take stuff and you don't really know the difference. Like you just can't really tell because you got so many different things going on. But this stuff, like I felt different, not crazy, not like jittery or like a pre-workout where you feel like all this energy. I just felt different, and that lasted throughout the day. Like I didn't have that like, oh man, I need an energy drink, or maybe I should grab a coffee or whatever. Right? I just felt like, okay. And after a couple of days, I was like, oh, I'm feeling even better. And even like it just kind of started to add up, right? Like I start feeling better and better about what I was doing, what I was taking. And, I took it that day and I was like, oh man, I'm going to give this a shot. It's like, it felt good. So I went back to the store later that day and I grabbed a couple more, just like for the rest of the week. Let's see what happens because, on that particular episode of the podcast, Joe was talking about like, you got to take it for a couple of days and you start to really feel it. Right. And so, so I went back and I grabbed 4 or 5, and, it's interesting because as the days went on, I started to feel more clarity, right? Like more just clear, I don't know, clear thought, clear focus. The stuff that I had going on didn't seem like crazy. And not that things changed or things got any different. I just felt better about it. And I think what I noticed, and that's obviously now I got to start doing more research, right? Like it worked for me. So like, whew, now I got to try to like do some different stuff, right? And so what I end up finding out is it's like a time released caffeine, which is interesting, right? Because you typically get an energy drink or a cup of coffee and you hit that or you drink that and it's like boom, right? And then you crash. But what I noticed with Magic Mind is that it lasted kind of throughout the day, right? So like if you guys aren't clear on what caffeine does, so caffeine doesn't actually give you energy. What it does is kind of it blocks your adenosine neuroreceptors, right? It just blocks them so that you don't feel tired, right? So your brain doesn't know that you're tired anymore because it's blocking the sensation that you would get typically, right? And so when those receptors unblock a few hours later, right, because you give this big burst of block, and you're like, oh man, I'm awake, you crash, right? And you experience kind of like this sudden drop in energy. Well, what I noticed with Magic Mind is that it because it works differently, it allows you to kind of have a sustained feeling of not tired. The beautiful part about that is because you feel less tired, you're also more productive. Because you're more productive, you get more done throughout the day, which means because I was more productive in the hours that I had, when I got to the evening, I was able to get more rest because I didn't have to stay up later to complete tasks because I had brain fog earlier. Like I was just knocking stuff out. So I was more productive. Because I was more productive, I had more stuff done by the end of the day so I could go to bed at a time in a time like in a normal time. I also noticed that because I was more productive, I had less stress. There's obviously some other things that go into this less stress thing. Like there's some ingredients, some herbs and things in Magic Mind that actually help with stress reduction and feeling like a sense of calmness or whatever. But I think, some of that stuff like or you don't know, right? Like I wouldn't have known any different. I just knew that I was getting stuff done and I felt less stress. If you want to kind of like get, nerd out a little bit or geek out a little bit, you can get into the different things that are in it, like all the mushrooms and all those different things, the nootropics that are inside of it. But for me, if you're like me as a father who has, a business and children and wife and kids and cars and all these jobs and things, like I don't need the details. Like I don't need to go deep diving into what's in there. Like, listen, here's the deal. Does it work or does it not work? Right? Am I going to be okay if I take it or if I'm going to have some side effects? So here was with no side effects and it works. Boom, sign me up. Sign me up, right? That's all I needed, right? And just a little test. Like now that I believe everything Joe Rogan says, but he seems somewhat credible most of the time. So I ran with it. And I've been doing it ever since. So like for the last 6 months, Magic Mind has become a part of my routine. If you've been listening to the podcast, you heard me talk about it before. I think going into 2025, as we're setting goals, a lot of us are going to have goals for productivity to make sure that we're getting things done. We're going to try to create this list of tasks that we want to do. I think you get more done because of your productivity, because you're clear on what you want to do. You don't have the fog, you don't have the stress, you don't have all of these other things that kind of go into it. Here's the other thing is if you do enjoy coffee, you can still have it, right? Like you still enjoy it. It's not a coffee replacement. This is not something that like I'm against coffee because a good friend of mine owns a coffee company. I'm not going to say you can't drink his coffee. His coffee is delicious, right? They make great stuff. But this is different. Like you can have this and your coffee. You just don't need to have as many coffees. It's like when we were little, they told you to have your Flintstone vitamins, right? And every day you wake up and you get your chewable, and then Hulk Hogan, told you to take your vitamins and you're a real American. Um, Consider Magic Mind a multivitamin for your brain, right? It's an essential vitamin for your mind that actually helps you throughout the day, the way that your multivitamin does with the rest of your body, right? Um, I don't even know how I got on that. Got on a little bit of a tangent, but here's the deal. If you are hearing this and you're interested in trying Magic Mind, because it's worked so well for me, I actually reached out to the company and I'm like, hey, how can I help the four pillar father community? How can I help them take advantage of something that's worked so well for me? And they were kind enough to reach back and say, well, why don't you just offer them an opportunity to try the product and give them a discount and to do it because if it works for you, it'll work for them. And I'm like, hey, all right, sounds good. Um, so uh, they've got something actually pretty cool. So I haven't yet gotten into the sleep uh, version of Magic Mind because they have like the regular version. Now they have a sleep version. And because they have a sleep version, they were doing something special together, right? And so for the first time ever, they have what they call a 24-hour pack, which is the focus and the sleep shots kind of bundled up for the first time, right? They put them two together. They've been selling them separately, but they bundled them up together. And because you guys are listeners to the podcast, you get it for 45% off, which is a huge savings. I paid full price for them. Matter of fact, when I bought the individual ones initially, I paid almost twice what I would pay with the subscription that I have now. Probably a little more. I'm not doing the math, but it was definitely more expensive to buy them individually. And then to buy the 15 pack and then like, hey, stop messing around and wasting money. Just subscribe and get them sent to you so you don't have to worry about trying to wait for them to come. They just come on time, right? So think about what you're doing right now to invest into your own mental wealth, right? Hopefully it's something. I don't know what it is, but hopefully it's something. If you're not doing anything, then this would be a great first step for you, because it doesn't require a lot. It's not a high barrier to entry. As a matter of fact, we're making the barrier to entry even cheaper. And it's something that's going to affect you completely for 24 hours, right? You're going to have a sense of clarity that you haven't had previously. You're going to feel better. You're not going to feel less overwhelmed. You're going to have less stress. And then at night, you're going to sleep better, right? You get to wind down faster. You get into a deeper sleep sooner. And it's all natural. It's healthy. There's no side effects. So in 2025, think about what you're doing for your mental health, what you're doing for your mental wealth, right? There's no better time to start than now. Like, this is it, the beginning of the year. Let's start now and see what we can do with 2025. Let's make 2025 the year you build your mental resilience, right? You get to improve both your sleep and awake. Sorry. You get to improve both your sleep and awaken your clarity with Magic Mind, right? All right. Enough about that. Enough about that, only because I want to move on to the other parts of the podcast, the other things I want to talk about. But like, that is, if you don't hear anything else, like if you somehow tuned out right now, you got all the value you need for this month. Because if you can take control of your mental wealth now in January, the beginning of the year, the rest of the year is going to be set up for you. Like, you're going to struggle in 2025 as a father if you don't do this. I'm going to just keep it a buck. If you don't get control of your mental wealth, your mental health in the beginning of the year, you're going to struggle for the rest of the year. Fatherhood is going to be tougher in 2025 if you are not doing this. Just to be completely clear, like, I don't know what else to say to you. Like, you have to try to take control of the things that you can control. Okay. That's your schedule. That's your health. That's your nutrition, your water intake. Like, those are the things you control. You can't control what happens at work. Matter of fact, once you step outside the door, and to some degree inside the house, you have no control. Like, a few weeks ago in my house where we live, we get really bad winds, right? And when it's really windy, the power company, they shut off the power, because we live kind of close to the mountain. And if, uh, energy lines go down, then we have issues with fire or whatever, right? What's up? We have issues with fire, so they shut down the power. So I'm in my house, minding my business, but beyond my control, there's nothing I can do about it, right? So you can't even control what happens in your own house, right? They decide to shut the water off, shut the power off. Like Kendrick say, cut the TV off, cut the TV off. They cut the TV off. You have no control over that, right? So control what you can control: your schedule, yourself, what you eat, what you drink, what you put into your body, what you read, what you see. Like, those are the things that you can control. So control the controllables, right? All right. So moving on. Um, 2025 is going to be an interesting year. It's starting off already as an interesting year, with things that are happening around the country. For those of you that are listening in other countries, I don't really know what's going on out there, but I do know here in America some things that are already happening, that are very interesting. But I think a couple of things. If you guys know, follow, or have been listening to the podcast for a while, I had Drew Camp on my podcast a while back, and I was actually on his. Drew is the owner, CEO of the Epic Dad Company. The Epic Dad Company is a supplement company that makes some really good supplements. That's neither here nor there, although those are great supplements. But Drew has since started a community, a fatherhood community, centered around fitness and the Epic Dad framework. As you guys know, I have my own community, or my own kind of deal, and I have since pulled back from that and joined Drew in his mission, because I think the collaboration with the two of us have been phenomenal. I think in the last 3 to 6 months, right around actually the time I started taking Magic Mind, in the last 3 to 6 months, we've had the opportunity to change over 50 men's lives, hundreds of pounds of weight lost, renewed energy, renewed strength. We've had the opportunity to help change and shape and structure the lives of men, and their families. And then that's been really awesome. So I'm just going to continue to lean into that, because I feel like there can't be any more important work than helping fathers reach the best version of themselves. But I mention that because every week we have these coaching calls and we kind of talk about some different things. We talk about our wins and losses, and we talk about things that have come up in our lives. And one of the things that we talked about as we open 2025 is having conversations with your wife and getting her on board and aligned with the goals that you have set for yourself and for the family. One of the pillars of the community is a vision statement. It's like values and vision. And, we, as men, as leaders, we have this vision for what we want our family to be, or who we want our family to be, who we want ourselves to be. And sometimes it's uncommunicated. Sometimes we have things that we want, we start working on them, and we don't really explain the who, what, why, and when. And we just expect people to get on board because, hey, I'm leading, you follow. But we're having our coaching call, and that was one of the things that come up was like, that was, why is this thing not charging? That was one of the things that came up was like, how do you get your significant other, your spouse, to be on board with the things that you were doing, and remove some of the kickback or pushback on, like, when you have to, like I say, I want to get us financially into a position, but that means I have to work. Like when she's like, why aren't you at home? And I think this goes to something my wife and I talked about on our separate podcast, that we need to talk about podcast, is that uncommunicated expectations, right, lead to future resentments, right? Like I am creating this vision for what I want our future to be, but I don't communicate it with you. So you later resent me because I'm doing things to get to this thing for you, but I never told you how I was going to do it. So what I kind of got walked away from our coaching call with is that we as leaders have to do a better job of communicating what we need from our partners, but then also what we are going to be doing. I know sometimes it's like, I'm just follow the leader. Like we do this with our kids sometimes, right? We don't explain ourselves because I'm the leader. You do what you're told, kind of thing, right? And I don't know that we necessarily think of our wives that way, but sometimes we do, and that's just kind of how leadership goes. It's like I'm the leader, you're the follower. You follow what I say, you do what I say do. But that doesn't work all the time when you're talking about an adult, right? As someone who is more free thinking, someone who has a conscious, someone who has a thought process that they go through on their own, or sometimes they just lose touch with it, just like you do, right? Like you have your goals, your dreams, your ambitions, and sometimes you work really hard at them, and sometimes you fall off. The same thing can happen with your partner. Is like, okay, we got on board, we got on, I'm aligned with the vision, but sometimes I lose sight of the vision, and so I start to complain about certain things, and then you get frustrated. You guys get what I'm saying? Like this stuff happens, right? And so what we have to do a better job of as leaders is effectively communicating what we need from our partners, right? We as men have been taught to internalize and not have these conversations and not do the things that would align us with having better conversations with people. And so we have to do a better job of doing that. Like we just have to. When those moments come up and there's like pushback from the people who we are charged with leading, then we can be frustrated with them. But ultimately what it means is that we didn't communicate effectively, right? Like I think this maybe the Navy SEALs or Marines or somebody, some armed forces branch or person, talks about extreme ownership. Maybe it's a Jocko talk about extreme ownership, right? Or maybe it's Navy SEALs, extreme ownership ideas. Like everything that happens either happens because of me or happens for me. Like no matter what it is something that I did that has that caused this outcome, right? Or didn't do that caused this outcome. And so what is it that I can do better to avoid this situation later on? So when these things happen and we have these disagreements, what could I have done differently to have prevented that or prevent it in the future? I think always, always, always in relationships, whether it be a fatherhood relationship or a romantic relationship with your partner, you have to communicate what you want. If I expect something from you, but I didn't tell you how or what I'm expecting, then what I'm doing is setting you up for failure and setting you up to resent me later and me to be frustrated with you later, right? Uncommunicated expectations lead to future frustrations or resentments. And so we have to do a better job as leaders. And I think this is something, and to a man, like we had a whole coaching group, and to a man, everybody's experiencing this on some level, in some regard. And so what that kind of sparked for me is like, okay, fellas, what are we doing in order to communicate better? So here's some things that I think we kind of came to a solution. Some things that I think about. One, if we're more consistent in our conversation with our partner, my wife and I, on a weekly basis, we get together and we talk business, the business of family. Um, you know, just like you would at your company, or just like you do at your company, you have a briefing. You guys talk about, what's going on, what's coming up in this quarter, or what's coming up this week, or whatever, what happened in the past week. Guys that are military or law enforcement, you have briefings, right? You kind of go over the things of the day, or the things of the week, or the pertinent issues. I think you have to do that as a family. I think a lot of time we're just passing ships. Like we're handing the kids off, or I'm going to work, you're going to work, like kind of just gradually leaving each other out of the conversations. And then we're expecting the other person to know what's going on. And that's not realistic. So consistent communication. Like I said, we do a once weekly, but sometimes it comes up more than that, where we need to communicate more than that. But I think you have to commit to having that happen once a week, at least 90 minutes at minimum. It may not take the whole time, but you set aside at least 90 minutes to have that conversation. Once you're done having that conversation, if there's time still left on the clock, then that's bonus time where you guys get to do something else. I think one of the guys in the group said that it's a great idea when you're having those conversations to do them publicly, because when you're in a public setting, it puts up guardrails. It allows you to have a conversation that is somewhat devoid of the emotions that potentially could come up, because it's more of a business meeting than it is like a you did this to me or you did that to me kind of situation. I think that was a great idea. Let's go out, have breakfast or lunch or coffee, or Magic Mind. No, a coffee, and let's just talk about what's going on, what's coming up for you this week. How was last week? How did I show up? Um, because it's easy for us to lose sight of the goal if we don't have conversations about it. Like I'm just working my part of the process, you just working your part of the process, and that's in two separate lanes. And so if we're in these two separate lanes, we never come back to the middle, then we end up having problems, right? So that was it. So consistent communication, somewhere public outside of the home. And then also start at the beginning, right? When you're coming up with these ideas, don't just keep them to yourself and then start working on them. Like tell her, have that conversation, have the initial conversation. Like, this is the goal for 2025. This is what I want to accomplish. This is what I think is going to work through it. Don't just have the goal and be like, this is what I'm doing, and then just randomly throughout the year be doing stuff. Like, this is what I want to do. This is what our milestones look like over the next, year, 12 months, 3 months. I want this. At 6 months, I want that. 9 months, I want this. 12 months, we should be at the goal. At week 4, like really like flesh it out for yourself, because that's going to help you achieve that goal, and then share that with her. Right. We talked about having some kind of shared note system, whether it be Google Docs or some of the other apps that are out there to share, hey, this is where I'm at, maybe checklists and things like that. Because you have to understand, when we talk about your spouse, this is your partner. That's what it's called, right? It's a partner. So they got to have some understanding of what you're doing. I likened it to and this is probably not the best way to do it, but I like to kind of connect things to sports, right? We're talking about sports and leadership. Like, you are the head coach, right? If you're the leader, right? Your wife is also a leader. So let's say she is the star quarterback and team captain. You have to be aware of the play calling and the things that are going on. Like, you might actually be, sorry, you're the head coach and offensive coordinator. She's a star quarterback, right? You are going to call the plays. You are going to make sure the team is getting on the ball. You're going to do all the head coaching things. But then you get into the game, you call the plays. Your wife is going to execute the plays. But sometimes there's audibles. Sometimes you send the message in from the sideline, like, hey, this is the play we're going to run, but something different has to happen because whatever shows up on the field, she runs. As long as she understands the goal of the play you called, then she can do the correct audible. But if she doesn't, right, she doesn't understand, and it's 3rd and 20, she doesn't understand why you called the play you called, and she runs a ISO on 3rd and 20, then you end up in a 4th down situation because you guys are not on the same page. Right. And so in order to get her on the same page, because she's proven she's a star player, but she can't be a star if you don't give her the proper playbook, if you don't lay out what the playbook is or what the situations are. And so it's your job as the head coach and as the offensive coordinator to make sure that you give her, not only give her the playbook, but help her understand why you would run certain plays in certain situations. Right. Like, you should be able to go take care of your head coach and offensive coordinator duties without having to like go check and make sure she's running the right play because you gave her understanding of the playbook. Now, what happens at halftime? We've executed a certain amount of plays. We come together at halftime. Hey, this is working. This is working. Hey, on this play, I saw this. And you talk, you communicate. Matter of fact, every time a series is over and she's coming off the field, or the quarterback's coming off the field, the offensive coordinator and the quarterback talk, whether it be a call up to the booth or like you sit down on the bench and like, this is the things that we saw. This is what happened on this play. Okay, so now when we go back out, we can execute. Do you guys? Hopefully that's making some sense to you guys. Like, you can't lead without your followers, right? Because you're not leading anybody, and it's hard to lead if they don't understand where we're going. Not only is it hard to lead if they don't understand where we're going, but if they don't understand how we're going to get there, they're going to, like, if we got to swim to get to the destination and they think we're riding bikes, those bikes are like, it's not going to work. Like, you have to give them the tools in order for them to do the things you want them to do, or else you're going to be frustrated with them and they're going to be frustrated with you. Future frustrations and future resentments. So let's make sure that in 2025, as fathers, if we are not communicating our expectations of the people that we are charged to lead, we're going to be in trouble. Right? In 2025, you are going to struggle as a father if you cannot communicate the expectations that you want of your family, of your spouse, of your children. You can't lead them effectively if you aren't doing those things. Okay? So let's make a commitment in 2025 to lean into communicating our expectations consistently, communicating our expectations and our goals effectively. Remember, you're either coaching it or you're letting it happen, right? If something is happening, it's because you either coached it or didn't, right? If there is an issue, it's because of something that you've done, and you can't change other people like that. There's some things you can do to help change people's perspectives. You can change people's mindsets on things. You can help people understand things in a different way, but you can't necessarily change who they are and what they do. What you can do, though, is change who you are and what you do. How effectively are you communicating the things that you're frustrated about? Like, could you have said that in a better way? Could you have done it differently? Could you have adjusted it in a way that they understood so that they could execute in the way that you wanted them to? That's all on you. It's up to you. All right. If it's meant to be, it's up to me, and all that kind of stuff is all on you. All right. All right. That is going to be the end of this episode of the Fit Fatherhood podcast. I am looking forward to the next couple of episodes of the podcast because I have some things that I want to share with you. I just wanted to get this one out of the chamber. Right, I needed to fire this one off because the next 3 episodes are going to be phenomenal. We are going to open up 2025 and crush it. Man, we are going to crush this year and do all the things that we need to do as fathers, as husbands, as leaders, because who else is going to do them if we don't? All right, fellas, have a great day, and I look forward to talking to you guys soon.